So thank you all for being here on what I feel is such short notice, but it's something that I feel is a very important subject that is all close to us and maybe even more important now than ever. So I wasn't surprised to see almost 70 people join this conversation. And I know for myself and Cassandra, this is something we talk about all the time, and it's constantly evolving. So that's what we're going to get into today is the evolving of ourselves and our healing and our journeys in that realm. And I know we both have a lot to speak to this, so both Cassandra and I will be sharing our own personal stories on this topic, but also the research we've done and what we teach in this realm and what we want to be sharing going forward. And also there will be some really wonderful takeaways today as well. And sorry to interrupt once again. Hi, Jillian. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to ask that you turn off your video and audio at this time and join us. Thank you so much. Right on. So, Cass, do you want to jump on from that starting point?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. So my name is Cassandra Hope. I'm in Toronto, and Jamie and I met years ago in nutrition school, and we've just maintained such a beautiful connection and relationship over the years. We're closer than ever, and it's really amazing because we kind of have this very symbiotic process as we are, growing up and healing and refining our practice. So we've talked so much about trauma in our own practices, and we talk a lot as sisters on the phone all the time about it as well. And given what's happening with definitely soul connection, given what's happening with COVID right now, this is a global trauma, and it's a topic that I think I'm speaking about so much on my social channels, and really just on my social channels, not so much with my near and dear, but to allow people to understand, like, this is huge, this is huge. And this isn't the only trauma that we've experienced. We, as being humans, they go hand in hand. Traumas happen all the time. And they accumulate. And one thing that I've seen in my practice as a functional nutritionist with a gut-brain specialty is that as the decades go by and as these traumas remain in our bodies, people are trying to whack-a-mole their symptoms and put out all these fires constantly. And what's happening is I see people wanting to outsmart their trauma by incorporating whole foods or appropriate nutrition, or exactly, Connor, bypassing. And I'm not going to say guilty, because there's no shame in that. We're going to talk about that as well today. Mm-hmm. But I am somebody who has become, in my 38 years of living, very skilled at suppressing my traumas. And only recently have I started to open up. So we're just so incredibly honored to be able to speak to this. It is, in my opinion, I don't want to speak for you, Jamie, but I feel like you share in this, that it is probably some of the most important work that we can do in our lives. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We don't take this lightly. We really respect all of you who are here, and we're excited to share as much as we can.
Yeah, beautifully said, Cass. Thank you so much. And something I want to, I guess we can start by, is that the whole process of, I'll use the blanket term, healing, is a journey. And what we're going to speak about today is that we're only ready for this when we're ready. And so if the approach, and we begin our journey with nutrition or simply focusing on foods because that's what we have as tools, then that could potentially be the jumping off point of what's possible for us. Mm-hmm. And this is completely my own opinion. But I think this work is incredibly important because what we're ultimately doing is getting to know and uncovering our truest, most authentic self. And I know that term is thrown around so often, our authentic self. What is that? And in my mind, it's what we feel in our heart. It's as simple as that. It's our heart speak, it's our body speak, it's that almost unknown, that unlabeled part of ourselves that is our truth. And that's the place we're getting to, because when we even get a glimpse of that, we can understand what's possible for us, what our potential is, what even our purpose, our gift is. And so I just think this is like magic work, and there's so many working pieces in it as a whole. And so I think this work is for everybody, and we can all take steps into uncovering what that is for ourselves individually.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I jump in there?
Please do. Let's keep it going.
All right. So, it's funny. I used to do a lot of, when I first started speaking about trauma on my social channels, people were DMing me being like, what's with this trauma, like it sounds so heavy. And I'm like, okay, I was refining my message and my wording and everything. And what I realized in those interactions is that people really, as a whole, don't really identify with being a traumatized person. Mm-hmm. And that's because there's so many, it's a spectrum. There's so many gradients of trauma, right? So, some of the ways that might be more relatable, if that's kind of like a blank spot for you, or you're in the gray a little bit, think about a lot of traumas we might not even be able to see or feel because they are so deeply suppressed. And that's okay. In time, when you're ready, they will come up. But the ones that might be really tangible in our day is like when we get sensations where, for me anyways, I don't feel like myself. I feel like I can't speak in a calm way. I feel like my body is trembling. I feel like my muscles tighten up. I get anxious or really insecure around certain people, or social anxiety. These are all what I've tracked them back to in my own personal journey. It always goes back to our childhood and our caretakers. I was not safe to speak in my home. So even though I wasn't a victim of physical abuse, or I wasn't in a car accident, I was neglected. I wasn't allowed to be seen. And that in itself is a trauma. And it's not the only one. There are many types. If there's scarcity of food growing up, or scarcity of money, the language that your parents might have used starts to impact the brain. And, my area of research is on the gut-brain connection, what's happening on a neurochemical level in the brain when we're experiencing trauma. It's quite fascinating because it's perfect in its design. It's perfect in its design. The brain is designed to keep us safe and alive. So, when we think about reptilian brain, older brains that came from when, Paleolithic times, we've been evolving to have this kind of knee-jerk reaction that is incredibly quick to keep us safe. So as soon as we feel that could risk protection, that could risk love, connection, that could risk my life, that is a very primal subconscious thought. It's not a conscious thought. So it's doing its job to say, hey, if it's not safe for you to speak and be fully you in all of its glory in front of your parents, well, guess what? Your parents are what feed you and protect you and give you shelter. So do not challenge that. You need to morph. And this is happening in seconds, microseconds. Mm-hmm. And our subconscious mind is about 90% of our decision making. So the programming that we get through our childhood is what determines our behavior and actions and belief systems as adults. So it's really important as we, ease into this year of 2020. We've only had this modern day of protection where we can order Uber Eats and we can go to the grocery store and have food and we have shelter and we're protected. We're not living in caveman times anymore. So we now are actually actively evolving our conscious mind. Our brains are changing in this century because of all the comfort. So conscious thought is what is allowing us to go, oh, that's old patterning. Oh, this is a symptom based on an experience I had that isn't happening anymore. I'm actually safe. I am actually completely sovereign. I am allowed to make my own decisions and be who I am without apology. And that process of learning that is the gift of being alive right now, I think. And it changes, you know, it lends to ending transgenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love that. And something you mentioned, even I think it was just in a personal conversation a little bit earlier, is identifying and or working with big T or little t traumas. And I want to bring this up because there are, and I think you had quickly mentioned this at the beginning of when you were speaking, but people not feeling as though they have trauma because it's not significant in their mind. And so I'd like you to speak to the big T, little t trauma in a second. I just want to share quickly other words that we can describe trauma to give it more life so that you feel perhaps how this can affect you. So a trauma can be a wound. It can be a discomfort. It can be distress or damage. It can be hurt or discredited feelings. And this can happen on not only the physical level, but the emotional, spiritual, and mental level. So if you want to speak to the big T, little t, and what that means.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, trauma is such a commonly used term right now. And I think because the brain is an association machine, again, incredibly fascinating organ. I am just amazed. The more I learn about the brain, the more I have so much respect for the human experience. The brain is an association machine. So it loves to conserve energy, and it really loves to just make quick decisions. We have fast brain, slow brain. So fast brain is when, you know, we see a movie, we watch, you know, TV shows that take place in a hospital, you see paramedics, you see hospitals, you see emergency rooms, and you hear trauma. And the brain associates those visions with the word trauma. Right? Trauma care center. You think, oh my God, people who are in dire need of care go to trauma care. Yes, that is the case for some people who are traumatized, but the word trauma also lends to the people who maybe had parents who didn't show up at their baseball games or their, you know, stuff at school, and they just felt really belittled or not valued, not important. It could be somebody who used negative language in front of them about other people or their family or their mom or their dad, parents who didn't respect each other. And I mean, you can see there's a gradient, right? So then you get into witnessing abuse or experiencing abuse. Then we start getting into the big T's. So there are, we never want to compare the level or the you know, the shade on the spectrum of trauma, because trauma is trauma. It hurts. And we can't ever say my hurt is more important or that kind of hurt is an actual trauma. Yours is just grow up, you know, grow up, get over it. Those kinds of comments or language, I think is, again, probably an indication of somebody who hasn't learned about what trauma is. So we want to have compassion, but also boundaries around people projecting their opinions of what our traumas are.
And also realizing that big T or little t trauma, you are still dealing with the same emotions,
right,
regardless of what you're experiencing. So someone experiencing fear in a case of abuse, it's the same fear and it's the same response that's happening within the body than if you feel fear because you were embarrassed of giving a talk in front of your classmates or something like that. It's the same response happening within the body on a physiological level. Excuse me. And so coming to the body, this is where I get so excited and fascinated and interested, is that there is so much happening as we respond and as even on an unconscious and conscious level to trauma. And when it all comes down to it, what we're really looking at is what's happening within the body. Because if we're not looking at what's in the body, we're simply in a mind frame of trying to work out consciously what's going on for us, if we are curious to do so. But what we're beginning to understand, and what research is showing now, is that emotions and memory is literally lodged and locked into our fascial networks on a cellular level. And so it's been shown, there is a psychologist and trauma therapist, Peter Levine, who has done a lot of research in this realm and is a fantastic teacher. And, you know, he's proving that with touch, with shining a light on certain areas of the body that haven't been seen, certain emotions that haven't been seen, through body work, through touch, we're able to release these emotions that we're carrying because of our wounds. It's exciting.
It's exciting. It's exciting. Is this an okay time to kind of jump in with some relatable?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, you know, I'm really open. If you follow me and you know my writing and my content, I share a lot about how trauma shows up for me, both with mental health and gut health and relationships and everything, because we really need to normalize this. This is a very common and it's a very common human experience that shame and shaming there's no place for that in healing. And, you know, it's important that people understand that if we're really suppressing who we are and what we're feeling, it's really difficult to actually engage in the work. So, you know, last year, so just to backtrack a little bit, I got diagnosed with a brain injury about 7 years ago by 3 different practitioners. And it wasn't until the 3rd diagnosis that I actually gave it merit, because I was like, I haven't had a concussion. I haven't fallen. I haven't been in a car accident. What are you talking about? I don't have a brain injury. Never mind, I was struggling with horrible neurological symptoms, uncontrollable racing thoughts, rumination, fear-based thoughts, paranoia, social anxiety, severe constipation, food intolerances, you know, and there I was trying to whack-a-mole all these things with my vitamins and my supplements and my gluten-free diet and everything, but I wasn't ready to look at what has happened to my brain because of the years of repeating traumatic events after a lot of trauma as a child. So what I've come to learn through research is that the brain actually physically changes. It rewires itself after trauma to become hypervigilant so that we're on high alert. These neurochemicals are released, our DNA changes so that, you know, we can smell better, we can see better, we can hear better, because we've already experienced such threat that if we're not acutely aware of our surroundings, we're at risk of death. Now, imagine if that goes unresolved for decades. It's exhausting and it drains our immune system. Our gut is constantly shut down because we're in fight or flight. So we're not digesting our food. We're not detoxing. Genetic predispositions to illness turn on because our DNA literally cannot handle any more toxicity or workload, right? So the brain needs to actually be rewired as well. So Jamie and I are talking about embodied healing, what it takes to do somatic healing, release those neurochemicals that are stored in our fascial network, but also we have to look at the very real biochemical side of what's happening to the brain and the gut when we've experienced trauma. Now, not everybody is going to have a brain injury from trauma. It really depends on your genetics. It depends on the frequency of traumas that you've experienced, your belief systems, you know, your environment. Epigenetics played a huge role in this. So that's all to say that this is a beast. Yes, it is. It sounds like a lot because it's a lot, but it's doable. It's totally doable. 7 years ago, I got diagnosed, and now I'm actively working through neuroplasticity-based programs. I can retain information better, I can speak better, I can read better. I can stay calm in a group environment. I can be in an intimate relationship and not think they're going to leave me and they're judging me, and constant just, pain. So things are calming down, but I also want to talk a little bit about destigmatizing the use of medication as a bridge as we heal. So as a holistic practitioner, there's a really common, narrative amongst practitioners, which is we don't need medication. Let's not advocate for medication. We want to do this naturally, improve gut health, do the mindfulness work. I did that for years and it wasn't working. And when I checked myself into KMH mental hospital here in Toronto last year, suicidal, because my brain could not handle any more inflammation, any more gut disruption, any more trauma. I was so out of balance with my neurochemicals because of decades of not addressing the brain and the gut properly, that it triggered suicidal thoughts. And when I got medication, I got my life back. So I'm not saying that medication is the answer. I'm saying if you're in a position in your journey toward healing your body and trauma, like oftentimes without the use of medication and upping your serotonin, it's difficult to be in your body. It's difficult to breathe because you don't feel safe. So the idea that, trauma-informed meditation and yoga and everything is so beautiful because it comes with the awareness that not everybody is going to be able to receive breath work, meditation work, yoga without freaking out, right? So if it means take some time, get on medication if that is the right decision that you make for yourself, do that. And in time, when you feel ready, embodied work might be more available to you then.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said, and it reminds me of a point that that you've used this word before, titration with supplements, and I like to use it now in the realm of healing because often people with an overexerted nervous system, one that's on high alert, that's kind of moving and feeling like this, it's not going to be helpful to dive into the root issue and explode the trauma and revisit it in that way so that we can uncover and release it. That might actually cause re-traumatization. And so when we explore titration, which simply means, how would you describe that? Well, it's like a
slowly introducing something.
Yes, perfect. And so we can slowly introduce and like layer by layer, think about an onion of exploration of self and trauma and discovery and releasing of what's within us. And so we can go in, we can explore a little bit, see where the body is at, see where the mind, the spirit is at, and honor that. And if something comes up, we allow it to come up gently, and then we rest there, we stay there. So once we are holding that place with care, that becomes the new normal. And then from there, we can jump off to an even deeper place. And so that's like the next layer off. And so it's just this really gentle, that's my approach anyway. That doesn't have to be everyone's approach, but that's, in my experience, when you're dealing with the nervous system and an overloaded one at that, I would say for each and every one of us, regardless if we've been given a diagnosis of some kind of illness, is that we're all overloaded at this time. It can be really helpful to go in gently and with love and with care and no judgment, and then explore from there. And then slowly, slowly you go deeper. But we also have to be ready and willing and eager to learn this about ourselves. And sometimes we're just not ready yet. And it comes in time if we have that curiosity. And even if we don't have that curiosity, maybe it's still within us. And that's when we see potentially life-threatening issues happen. We hear a lot of the time things like cancer or a car accident will happen, and it shocks us into our awakening. And so that's maybe more of the dramatic getting to the root issue of our stuff and having it kind of explode everywhere. And now we have to look at all of the pieces, decide which ones we want to keep, and decide which ones are ready to be released. Excuse me, before I continue, I wrote down, there are 7 principles of body wisdom that I would love to share with you all. They're a bit long, so I did write them down, but I would love to read them out. So the first one of basic body wisdom principles is: the body responds to external environment with constriction, blockage, muscle tension, unbalance, and acts in unhealthy habits when stressed physiologically or emotionally threatened or misused. Number 2, the body remembers implicitly feelings, sensations, and memories when vulnerable, emotional, triggered, or touched. Number 3, the body changes all the time. It's moldable and flexible. Number 4, the body's experience is transient and does not last. Even pain will subside. Number 5, the body is capable of repair and healing at any time. And I added a little cliff note there: when we're ready. It can happen anytime, but we have to be ready. Number 6, the body's wisdom comes forth when attended to or related to with kindness, curiosity, and patience. And lastly, number 7, the body is the most important place for healing and transformation. It's good.
That's so much.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. So what I'm seeing, clearly I'm excited about this. What I am seeing in my work as a craniosacral therapist is just, this is a type of body work where we get the opportunity to shine a light on the physical body and everything that the physical body encompasses, which is literally all of us. It encompasses our emotion, it encompasses our soul, it encompasses our mind, our consciousness, all of this. And so that's why I'm always bringing it back to the body. So within craniosacral therapy, we are so gently shining a light on the places that have perhaps felt misused or unloved or dissociated from, for whatever reason. And then we're able to take it one step further and use what is called somato-emotional release, which is a type of somatic therapy using dialoguing, but we access the subconscious part of ourselves. That could be our body. We can talk directly to our body. I don't know if any of you knew that, but we can have dialogues with the parts of our body to better understand what's going on. And once we've reached that place, we can explore what's there. We can see the root of issues if it's available to us at this time. Sometimes what can happen too, if we're not ready, and this takes skill from a practitioner, is that we'll experience resistance. And I think we're all quite familiar with what resistance can be like. It's maybe a sensation of fear on a conscious or unconscious level because we're not ready to explore something yet. And that's totally fine. And it also has to be honored. But yeah, we get to explore what's there and very gently allow for shifts and things to release in time. And when we release, this is when we get those clear moments of experiencing who we truly are. And it often feels like lightness or clarity or joy for no reason, or just a sense of bliss in knowing who you are. And so this work I find to be so incredibly potent. And it always, for me, comes back to the body and what we're feeling. And we don't necessarily have to even do craniosacral to explore that. We don't have to do any type of body work, although I'm a huge advocate for it, and energy work for that matter. But we can do simple practices like closing our eyes and just allowing our awareness to roam within the body, see where it takes us. oh, my left shoulder, look, I actually do sit like this. I have scoliosis for emotional reasons, actually. And I can see, oh, does it go to my left shoulder? Is there a pang of sensation here? Or do I feel some butterflies in my stomach? And allowing these sensations to be, just noticing, just feeling, just allowing them. And it can be as simple or as challenging as that, really, because we have not been taught this in school. We have not been taught how to be with our bodies or to be with our emotions. And one thing I'll finalize that to summarize is that when we connect with our body this way, a lot of us say, and so many of you have come to me saying, I don't know how to trust my intuition. Do I even have intuition? Our body wisdom is our intuition. And so naturally, you become so much more intuitive with yourself, with others, with life around you when you begin to listen to the body.
Word, sister. I'm like jumping in my seat. This is so great. I remember a couple of years ago, I asked Jamie and her partner in her retreats to do some distant craniosacral work on me, because I felt I knew that it was important, but I didn't know how to do embodied healing. And what I have come to realize, this is the way my brain works. I need to have like an analogy. I need to understand, okay, give me another example. What does that look like? Embodied, moving trauma through the body. So just to pick up on your point, we're not taught that. We instinctively know as animals how to clear trauma from the body. I use this analogy all the time with people because it really clicked with me when I heard it. But if you look in nature and you see an animal that is being chased by, let's say, a lion, and they escape and they survive, and you're looking at that animal that survived, and they shake it off. They just they shake. And that is the animal being present with the trauma, clearing the neurochemicals out of their fascial network and moving on. Like life is just fine. They're going to find their grass or their whatever, and they're going to go hang out with their buddies, and it's over. What we do, because we model our parents and we live in an incredibly disassociated society, right? Like we have evolved based on having a tribe, having many teachers, having many different support systems, having culture to teach us. I'm learning right now a traditional indigenous way of clearing trauma from the body, which is shaking. And it's so scary for me because I have not felt safe. I learned that it wasn't safe to be in my body because of the things that I was witnessing as a child. It was better to disassociate than to be in that state. So it's my job now, as I reparent myself, to learn what are the modalities that work for me, that I feel connected to actually move this energy out of my body. I went through an incredibly painful and traumatic breakup 2 years ago with somebody. It happened so fast, which when trauma happens really quickly, related to people, somebody dying, somebody goes away, somebody quits you, you lose a child, oh my God, God forbid. The trauma is very you get very confused, and that's where the traumas get deeper. When you're very confused, it's deep, and my go-to was smoking weed every day, every day, and dancing. So I would go to these day parties. I wasn't using chemical drugs. I wanted to just smoke weed, be by myself, and I didn't want to talk to anybody. It was my meditation, because I would go and listen to this incredibly intense, high-based techno, and I would leave feeling like myself again. And that was me actively, I didn't know it at the time, but I was clearing trauma from my body. So what I'll share with you guys, I'm about 6 days sober now. I've quit weed about 6 days ago after using it for about 3.5 years. I started using it when we started really drifting apart. And I wasn't able to leave the situation yet, or I didn't want to. So we both started smoking every day to suppress what our bodies were telling us, which is, hey, you're not right for each other. And that means you're going to have to move apartments. You're going to have to get rid of the lease of the car. You're going to have to say goodbye to an 8-year-old child. These are big things for people. So I chose the path of least resistance, which was suppressing and using weed to suppress those emotions. And I continued to use weed and fiercely protected it. If anybody told me, hey, you should really cool out on the weed smoking, I'd be like, okay, not talking to you anymore, you're judgmental. Because my brain, my body wasn't yet ready to feel everything that came after that breakup and through that breakup and all the traumas before that. So now that I'm in a stable place, I'm on my medication, I've gone through trauma therapy for the past year, I'm in a beautiful, loving relationship now, I just feel calm and I feel like it's time. And now I am able to do the embodied healing. It's not that it wasn't relevant before I quit weed. It was completely relevant. I just wasn't ready. And that's okay. I have complete compassion and love for that part of myself who was experiencing those things,
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so potent. And I'm curious, I'm just throwing this out there. It came up as you were speaking too, but on the topic of not being ready, do you think it's relevant or still helpful if we're doing embodied practices on our own, perhaps not seeking out embodied therapy, but like you said, unconsciously you were going to those raves and like giving your all and like letting it out, shaking, whatever you needed to do to release. And so even if that is a choice we're making, I think I'm going to answer my own question now. I think it's something that we can still choose to do, even if we're not necessarily ready for the full experience of looking at maybe what underneath or underlying our fear-based emotion, which we all have in some way. And I'm just thinking of my movement practice and how it's evolved. And I, again, like you, wasn't even sure what was happening. I just knew I felt fucking good and that it was liberating and freeing. And ultimately, that's the place where we're hoping to get to anyway, I think. And on that note, I want to say too, when it comes to somatic healing or embodied healing or shining a light on our shit, you don't always have to get to the root cause as well for it to be released. So I just want to make that clear. We don't always have to speak it. Talk therapy is wonderful, but we don't always have to speak it into existence for it to be cleared and to be released. That's the beauty of this work. Although we can, and it can be very interesting and help with big, perhaps big T releases, it's not always necessary. And that's where even now we're moving into the realm of more so the energetics of how trauma is stored in the body. And we can move energy and we don't necessarily have to go in and open our eyes to it. We can just allow it to move. And that takes a little bit of trust and surrender, again, if we're ready. And so I think, there are so many more simplistic practices, embodied practices that we can do to shake off energy. And I'll share a couple if everyone would like. And we can do these even not to explore our trauma, but to simply help us and help our nervous systems come down a little bit from a place of anxiousness or fear or even sadness, depression, just to almost, my friend sometimes says, we'll go for a walk, she's like, we're just blowing the stink off, let's just clear out the room a little bit so we can get back to our equilibrium and then look at what's going on. And so whether that is dance, one yoga pose that I learned in yin yoga called tantramasana is simply lying on the floor with your knees up, your feet planted on the ground, your arms planted on the ground, and you're just wailing, you're hitting the ground, just letting it go for 20 seconds at a time until you feel this completion. It's the same with embodied movement. What does your body want to do at this time? Allowing the body to speak. There are so many practices I teach people and facilitate and do for myself that help just kind of the energy so we can come back to that homeostasis or some kind of balance and then continue on our journey a little bit more level and clear and whole.
Definitely. I'm going to share kind of, I think this is a cool group to do it with, but my boyfriend and I, he's got this really unique way of clearing his trauma every day, or clearing energy, stored energy in his body. And he's developed this practice on his own. I've experienced it. It feels very much like a mix between cranio and osteopathy. And he loves to put sound to what he's feeling. So if he zones in on an area that's, just needing some love and some attention, and he'll try and match the vibration, he can just feel it, and then he'll match it through sound. And we were having sex the other day, and I was laughing. We talked afterward about, why is it okay to release sounds while you're having sex? Like, there's pleasure, and there's, you moan and you create these beautiful vibrations and these sounds to express the energy that you're feeling in your body. But there's so much shame around expressing, for me anyways, expressing noise to relate to the trauma I feel in my body. So he's invited me to make a sound when I connect with something in my belly, because my gut is where I hold everything. And I was like, no. And he's like, okay. And I'm working with a bioenergetic healer in Toronto right now. And because of COVID, she can't get her hands on me, but she's asking me to do the shaking meditation at home. And when she gets her hands on me, she goes, get ready, because we are going to be making noise. Like, get in there and get it out, and like tap into that animalistic part of you. And that, in the past, like, I'm more nervous for sure, but in the past it would be a deal breaker. There's no way I would do it because I didn't feel safe. And I remember being in grade 2, my teachers being like, okay, everybody be a tree and put your arms up. And I was like, no, are you kidding me? So I think those are signs that there is still stored trauma in the body, right? And when there's that resistance to just doing whatever, right? Doing whatever it is, making sound, moving. In a tantric workshop I did once, they had everybody be a different animal and move around like that animal and make all this noise. And I sat on the ground and I cried with my eyes closed. I would not participate, right? So you can see how people who are not ready to physically feel those traumas, how they might respond to different modalities that are presented to them. So please don't feel like you're wrong or you're bad for not being able to engage in those things. It's, we've said this a few times, but I really am an advocate for people to just honor themselves, whatever place that they're in their healing journey. So if clearing trauma for you just simply means sitting with your emotion and actually feeling it, great fucking job. Great job, And if you get more curious and you feel safe and you want to do some of that really big sound work and movement and everything, cool, fill your boots. Like, it's your journey, it's your destination to decide how to move through it.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for bringing that up too, because my journey has not been linear, and I didn't start out in this so-called embodied way, and it's still unfolding all the time. But I remember actually when Cass and I met, I was living in Toronto and I went on a date with this guy and we went dancing, and I thought I was dancing or moving how I wanted to move. And he looks over at me and he goes, "What are you scared of?" And it had never, ever, ever been brought to my attention before. So much so that at first I was like, what are you even talking about? I'm dancing. And he's like, you're not dancing. And it was fun and playful and whatever. The delivery might have not been the best, but that's okay. And it was the first time that it was brought to my attention, like, wow, I am scared. I am so scared to be seen for who I truly am. And I ended up even shutting down more at that time. So it's so important just to honor your body. And when I do facilitate workshops or different things and we do a movement exercise, I make sure to say, if stillness is your biggest expression of the moment, do that. Honor what it is for you. Like you said, Cass, if it's sitting in meditation and just feeling what's there, if you're standing in stillness and you feel awkward, that's perfect. You just feel that. It's going to be an experience one way or the next for for whoever is moving through that process. And it can be excruciating. And so maybe that takes you, that titration thing we were talking about, maybe that takes you to a certain edge. That could be your healthy edge. We don't want to push past it, but maybe you've achieved this new edge, right? Fucking on. That's awesome. And you probably, like myself or Cassandra, have learned a lot from being at that edge. There's so much that it shows us. And I had another point and now it's gone.
I actually wanted to ask you to invite you to share that story if you feel comfortable, if you're okay with it, about Brian, how the stress expressed in his body.
Yeah.
Because I'd love to, once you're finished speaking to that, if it's cool, I want to jump in and speak about how does stored trauma actually present as disease in the body.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So I'll just preface by saying Cassandra and I have known each other for probably, I don't know, 6-7 years now. And throughout our entire timeline of our beautiful friendship, we are literally 1 week apart in this synchronized parallel universe of our lives. One thing that happens to her will happen to me. Actually, I'm like the week ahead of her. So whatever happens to me ends up happening to her. So I've also established a new relationship and a partnership, and it's been really beautiful. And so that's who Brian is, and sharing to that with things, all that's going on right now, and with his permission, I'm sharing this story. About 2 weeks ago, he started experiencing extreme pain, like a knot in his shoulder that he had only previously experienced when he was building his house. And this pain came on again about 2 weeks ago. And at the time it was just like, oh, damn it. You know, I have this knot in my back. It's back from whatever reason, for whatever reason. And, you know, just being me, I get curious that I witness. I'm like, okay, cool. I wonder what's under there. But we just leave it. And interestingly enough, so for him, one of the biggest triggers at the time in the last few years he shared with me is money, and perhaps the lack of, or what comes with the lack of financial abundance. And interestingly, just 2 days ago, he hops on the phone, gets a lot of his things sorted out, you know, deferred mortgage, yada, 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 all the things that a lot of us are going through right now. And the moment he hops out the phone, and I shit you not, he goes, the knot in my back is gone. It's literally gone. And I checked in with him this morning and it is still gone. Full range of movement, of motion, and complete release. It's fantastic. And I had asked him, when was the last time he had experienced this knot in your back? I was curious if there was some kind of theme or connection there. And it was when he had built this house. And the connection actually was less about the actual building of the house, but more about the financial burden that brought. And so his money trauma sits right in his right shoulder. Very interesting.
So like we think about that top-down approach, right? So the neurochemicals are produced in the brain or in the gut. They're released by our organs or by our glands, and they will migrate to certain areas depending on what's happening in our fascial network or in our bodies, our genetics, etc. So, you know, Brian's genetics might lend to, you know, shoulder stuff. And that's really common. A lot of people hold stress and tension in their shoulders or their guts. When we hear trauma or emotion is stored in the hips, my understanding is that the most amount of fascia is in the hips. So when we think about how neurochemicals are stored in the fascia, they're going to really be dense amounts through the hip. And when I was growing up, you know, my mom is very mentally ill, undiagnosed, untreated, and a severe alcoholic. So up until I was 12, I experienced a lot of abuse. And when I was 12, she left, and I haven't seen her since. So I was pretty angry and a pretty, you know, traumatized kid. And I always presented with gut health stuff. But then I started kickboxing, and I loved it because it was like a way to move energy and feel powerful and strong because I was angry and I wanted to let it out. And what ended up happening was because I wasn't clearing that trauma, and I didn't feel safe to feel the pain of abandonment and all the years of all of that stuff, my hips gave out on me, and I would be seized in pain where I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, I couldn't eat, I couldn't go to the bathroom. I would literally be shaking on my couch. My dad would have to pick me up. I'd be in excruciating pain, take me to the chiropractor, and they would do electrostim to help to release the muscles. But that never went away. Like, I became a bodybuilder, I did fitness competitions, and my hips and my back would seize all the time. And when we think about how this snowball starts with that, when you're in chronic fight or flight, and those neurochemicals are constantly being produced, you know, I referenced this earlier, but digestion and detoxification shuts down. So as you know, as you move through life, you become very vulnerable to infections, and you become very vulnerable to an imbalance of neurochemicals. So depression, anxiety, food intolerances, autoimmune disease, all of these things can and will probably start to develop because we're not getting that body back into that natural state of homeostasis where those neurochemicals are being processed, and then we go back into a rest and digest state where we're producing plentiful digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, to protect the gut from infections. Then the gut can actually move food through instead of food staying stagnant, because the gut, it takes too much energy for the gut to perform digestion when you're in chronic fight or flight. So it just stops, but we keep eating. So think of what's happening to that food. It's sitting in the gut, it's rotting, it's fermenting, it's feeding pathogens. We become constipated or chronic loose stool, more food intolerances develop. Then we can possibly enter the beautiful world of people judging us for being somebody who's gluten-free, or, hey, I'm going to be that person who orders a little different at the restaurant. And it can trigger all of these old cycles of shame, not being seen or validated, protected, respected. So these traumas compound, or these life situations, they really do keep going until we reparent ourselves. And that process, like we've been driving home through this whole talk, is about titrating it in. Just be curious about what am I gravitating toward? What feels good? Does creating boundaries feel good? Does using my voice more feel good? Does that feel more tangible and available to me? Does ending relationships that make me feel like crap feel more tangible to me? There are so many ways that helping our bodies, and like Jamie was saying, our whole body, our mind, body, spirit, to evolve with us so that we can heal and recover. It's all different. So just lean in, like, stay curious, stay open, try some stuff on. If it doesn't fit, you're not broken. You didn't do it wrong. It just might not be the thing for you. There are literally thousands of different ways that we can reparent ourselves and heal ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many ways, and it's fun exploring them too. And on that note, we are coming up to the hour mark, and I'm curious if anyone has any questions, since we are doing this live and have a lot of you tuning in from your devices. Shoot us a message in the chat box, and we can start answering some questions that may be more specific to you or what's going on. And we can continue on from there, maybe for another 20 minutes before we wrap up.
Can I have a pee break?
Go for it, girl.
I'll be back.
Pee break. Anyone who wants one of those, take it. And we will wait for any questions and just put them into the chat box. Thanks, Melissa. Great question. Love you, Jillian. Thank you. Okay, so we can start with Melissa's question, and perhaps both Cass and I can speak to every question. So if you have any, put them in the chat box. But we will start with Melissa's question. What are some ideas to heal trauma stored in the womb or cervix? And I love that question. I'm just going to, there we go. Okay, so my approach might be different than someone else, might be totally different than how Cass would approach this too. I would at first begin with some kind of body work session. And of course, I practice craniosacral therapy. It can be done in person or by distance. Or you could choose shiatsu therapy, acupuncture. And this is simply to allow the body permission to just be how it is. So allowing the body to surrender into what is going on, whether it's, trauma stored in the womb or otherwise, and for it to just feel okay for a moment, to be supported, to really be loved up and seen without judgment or anything like that. So very often when I'm working with my clients and we start a process together, the very first session is always hands-on work, not much dialogue, because we are just so gently approaching the body and giving it love and shining a light on those places. Perhaps there's something happening and it's being stored in the cervix or the womb, but it's originating maybe up at the heart. So this is something we can work with and explore in that first session. And from there, I find, that's when I would go a little bit deeper, because we've created this safe container. It's like, okay, I feel like I can go there. And this is a dynamic of the practitioner client, this safety and trust that's also being built. It's so, so important. And then being able to go into, and perhaps we're dialoguing with the womb. The conscious mind is put aside. We sometimes put it under the table for the session, or we acknowledge the mind, but ask it to, stand aside as we perform some somatic dialogue or something like that. And we can go in and either explore, we can take our subconscious and go in and explore the actual terrain of the cervix and the womb, see what's there. Or maybe we explore it by addressing the feeling or the emotion. And it's kind of like this breadcrumb trail in which we're exploring down to the end of the path, in hopes that we find a place that is this root or the most significant point in which we can get to with that place in the body. And so when we do reach that, and at any point in the unraveling, we are able to continue to release. And so that's just one way. This can also be done like the somatic therapy or the therapeutic approach can be done even over the phone. Often I have clients just lying in their bed in a meditation, and I'm guiding them within their body. And I'm just getting a little bit off topic here, but one thing I do want to mention that Cass asked me to say is that there's this, I truly believe every single one of us has the ability to heal on our own. And I do not call myself a healer by any means. I am facilitating the healing for another individual. And I had this conversation with a friend, and he made it clear to me, the word facilitate en français, in French, is facile. And that in English is meaning easy. And so when I think of facilitating or directing someone's journey, I'm simply there to guide and make it a little easier for someone to do that. I'm not putting any of my stuff in there and I think this is right, and so we're doing it my way. It's no, you have this within you and you are guiding all along. Your body is guiding, your soul is guiding, and I'm there to help make it easy and to help facilitate, facile, that whole process. because when I'm talking about this somatic work, I heard a question recently. Someone asked, can I do it on my own? And maybe, but putting our conscious mind, and I've tried this, putting our conscious mind aside, and we need our conscious mind to facilitate this kind of healing or releasing. And so we would then be working with our conscious mind and our body and our subconscious, and I think it would just get a little bit confusing. So it can be really great to connect with someone who you trust, a practitioner that you really feel connected to go into those places. That's my long answer.
Wonderful. Wonderful, because I too am about to embark on womb healing. I have not felt safe addressing my womb. And there's a lot of intergenerational trauma around the womb. So, you know, hearing your answer really helps me to understand what's in store for me, or possibly in store for me if I use that approach. And the bioenergetic healer that I'm working with now, she actually said, your womb is going to be, your womb trauma is going to be what actually in turn helps you to be a better coach.
Can I say my opinion why?
Yeah, because I don't know why. Please tell me.
Our wombs are directly connected to our throat. And so it's almost like when we work, let's say, on our throat chakra, on opening that up, on speaking our truth and speaking in general, it's almost like we experience an opening as well. This is where like things go out, you know, we are meant to birth. We can do this by speaking and releasing in that way, but we have the capacity as women or individuals born as women in this lifetime to birth a child. And so if you're working on your throat chakra or you're working on your womb, both might have the chance to open and blossom in that way. It's very cool.
Wonderful, because I have actually found in times where I'm not feeling in my body or in my power, or, you know, secure and safe, it's really difficult to speak. My voice actually shakes. I get really hot and my throat just gets really like, it just it's horrible.
Yeah, you had mentioned that you have a little bit of maybe fear or anxiety going into this session with your bioenergetic healer when you're going to express and make those sounds, those guttural sounds that are coming from the womb or deep within us. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll read the next question from Masha. How can I release memories and emotions that have to do with being used in a relationship? I have forgiven, but I often still feel so triggered. Yeah. So, sorry, I got caught up reading another question. I just wasn't sure if Martine was adding to Masha's question. So I'll read it one more time. How can I release memories and emotions that have to do with being used in a relationship? I have forgiven, but I often still feel so triggered. Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit.
What's that?
Did you have something that you wanted to?
I will and do, but if you want to kickstart this, please go for it.
Okay, cool. So, you know, when we learn about trauma on a neurochemical or a biochemical level, we think the polyvagal theory is amazing. It is an understanding of what state our nervous system goes into when we're triggered, or when we're in a very calm place where we're connecting and we're artistic and we're creating. That is a ventral vagal state. When we are depressed and shut down and isolated, that is a dorsal vagal state. And then we have our mobilization state, which is fight or flight. So when we think about, you know, when we're in a situation or a relationship and we feel triggered, we are looking to basically find homeostasis through the vagal system, through the vagus nerve. And we can do that through co-regulation. So, you know, it's really important. There's two ways, obviously, self-regulating, which Jamie will speak to, I'm sure, in a second. But I can share a personal story that in this new relationship that I'm in, I used co-regulation to release that old story, those old memories that I am not worthy. And I'm not saying that this is what your memories are, but for me, my memory was, my partner isn't going to stick around if I voice a dissatisfaction with something. So I chose somebody now who I trust deeply and who's amazing at communication and who puts himself first, his healing practices, so that he can then give to me. And when I spoke up recently about an event that made me feel really, I wasn't happy, he said something, it just rubbed me the wrong way. It triggered all this stuff. My body knew before I did. I had to go into meditation and try and figure out, what is this eruption of feelings and emotions? And I wanted to cry, and really there was no fight happening. I was like, this is old stuff, but I need to vocalize it. So I did. He stopped cooking dinner. He came over, he sat down, he completely heard me. He listened to everything I was saying, validated me, and then we talked through it, and it's gone. It's gone. That fear is gone, you know? And it actually, I'm finding it's branching out into other areas too. Like before, I would, if a partner didn't text me goodnight or didn't check in in the morning, I would be wildly triggered to the point where I was like, he's over me, he doesn't love me anymore. You know, this is major abandonment stuff. And because we have been co-regulating through these triggers, he might fall asleep with his kids at 8:30 at night and I don't hear from him. And I don't even think about it. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I hope they're all having a good morning. I'm not saying it's going to be that way for everybody, but I think the co-regulation piece is really unique in healing our traumas. We heal through relationships too, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I would love to speak to this too, but since we got an influx of questions, I'm going to speak to the next one, if that's okay. And at the end of this, we will share ways in which you can get a hold of us. So if there are any questions that come up after this, or you want to go deeper into something, we'll be sharing how you can connect with both Cassandra and I. So Martine says, feeling like someone is drilling into my right shoulder blade for years. It's like I'm being voodooed. And that I find super interesting. And in my practice of body work, I have experienced this, not for myself in particular, but with clients. And I would say that if it's something that feels like it's beyond you, like if it's not your body retaliating in some way or your body holding on to something, it can be very possible that there is something energetic or beyond the body that is bringing forth a physical symptom. And we see this sometimes, we can see this directly when we're so affected by someone else's energy, or, I'm just figuring out the right way to say this, but there is, and in my practice, and this doesn't happen often, and I'm not at all saying this happens or this is happening for you, but there are ways in which to release, and I'll use the term entity, and not to make it sound derogatory or gross or dark, but something that isn't yours. That's the term I'm using for something that isn't yours, but is showing up in your body. It's stuck to you or glued to you or feels like it's inside you and it's not yours. This could even be, like Cass is saying, intergenerational trauma or something from a past life that is still within our being. And so that's kind of when the somatic therapy moves into more of a shamanic healing, in my experience anyway, where we can then connect with what's going on similar to our womb, but we would see what's there, see if it wants to speak. Is this drilling? What's the purpose? Why is it there? And is it willing to work with us? Is it willing to release, to move? What's the lesson here for you in particular, Martine? And so that's the kind of stuff, that's how I would approach it, in a very gentle way. It may not be done in one session, but again, it's about getting curious about the body. And because it's happening to our body, it's being stored within our body. So whatever that is, we can go in and we can explore. And I think that's what I'll say to that. And again, not to shake anything up with the term entity. I wouldn't say that that's what's going on, but I have had experience with that. And sometimes there's stuff, we hold on to stuff that isn't ours. Yeah. So the next question is, I hope I'm saying this right, Ajay. If there is some condition in the body, can it be due to some trauma? And how do I identify if it is? Cass, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So, when we think about what's happening in the brain, the thought patterns that we're having, the conscious and subconscious belief systems, how we internalize the world, ourselves, people, food, all of these things are running millisecond by millisecond, 24/7, 365. So if there's been some trauma, the patterns that the brain is engaging in are going to bathe every single cell in neurotransmitters. So they can either be down-regulating supportive neurotransmitters like taurine and GABA, and these calming and soothing, relaxing kind of neurotransmitters, or they can be upregulating, right? Dopamine is also upregulating, but other neurochemicals that really kind of fire up our adrenals and fire up our gut and fire things up to create movement, because there is this underlying kind of story that's always being played out that we're under threat, right? Until that trauma has been healed, identified, cleared, etc. The body is going to respond to those neurochemicals, and it will either respond by homeostasis, good digestion, everything is detoxing well. Those are the main things that you want to be experiencing in the day. When we are always upregulated because that trauma has not been, we don't have tangible tools, we don't have systems to work through, both mental and physical, to keep ourselves in that homeostasis, the body's going to respond to those upregulating neurochemicals by going into fight or flight. So like I said earlier, if you're having chronic dis-ease or disease, it's often because there is the DNA, your cells cannot handle any more work. There's too much, think about epigenetics, right? So the way that not only our environment in our home, but also the air we breathe, the food we're eating, the soil it was grown in, the medications we're taking, if we're engaging in drugs and alcohol, all of these things are going to change our DNA. So they compound with those neurochemicals that are being sent through the body every day from the brain. And that, when you think about autoimmune disease or disease, it's when the body's reached its threshold of toxicity, both energetic and tangible toxicity, and it starts to present with disease because cellular detoxification just isn't happening. We're not intaking nutrition properly, we're not detoxing the cells properly, communication systems are just not flowing properly. So when clients come to me, I'm a functional nutritionist. I work with people with chronic latent gut infections and brain injuries, and what I find is they come to me with this ball of yarn, per se. And what we do is we start with the basics. So we want to clean up their epigenetics. We want to clean up, how is your water source? Are you drinking mineralized, purified water? Are you drinking water that has hormones, hormone byproducts, toxins, drugs? Because those things aren't filtered out of the water, right? Those things are going to affect our DNA. Are you eating clean, whole foods that are organic and grown in beautiful soil? Or are you on a refined North American diet? Those are the basics, right? What types of supplements are you taking? What kind of minerals are you taking? We're all very mineral deficient, which is going to drastically affect our nervous system and our gut health. And then we start to go deeper. So whatever symptoms are still remaining after we kind of clean up 6 to 8 weeks of, environmental stuff, then we start to go deeper and say, all right, what's still here? Is it food addictions? Is it addictions to, I work a lot with addicts. And disordered eating clients. So we start to look at behavioral patterns, and that's where we find the traumas. So, if it's hard for you to identify on your own, I would say working with a functional coach, somebody who can say, all right, these are the layers. Let's start with the tangible stuff, the easier stuff. Let's clean up your environment, and then let's see what else is left. And if you're comfortable having somebody asking you questions, because that's, I'm always checking in, getting permission, but it's like, what about that is true for you? And then we start to get to the root emotions. Oh, when my parents did this, or when my teacher did this, or my brother used to do this. And then we start to understand, what was the trauma and what belief systems did you develop because of that trauma? And how are you acting out or playing out those traumas in your behavior that is keeping your body in that state of reactivity, right? So that's kind of the long and the short way of saying, yes, you can definitely figure out if there are traumas related to your symptoms and dis-ease in the body, for sure. For sure.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we have 2 more questions that I would love to get to. I know some of you have hopped off at this point, and that's okay because this is recorded. So if we'd like, and for those of you who are still here, we'll finalize this conversation by answering the last 2 questions. And this one from Drew here. Thank you, Drew. Thank you so much for your beautiful heart shares. I am healing long-standing gut health brain struggles, definitely due to childhood trauma. Anything you recommend prioritizing for deepening the healing process? So I feel like this speaks to you, Cass, directly, but I'm happy to talk to it as well. Yeah.
I would just say, like, I'm going to keep it simple because I'd love to hear what you have to say, Jamie. Infections need to be addressed first. Infections need to be identified and cleared, and then you can start to get into healing the brain. But if infections are there, it's sending an affect message through the immune system to the brain that there is trauma or something in the body that needs to upregulate the nervous system and the immune system. And it's just this horrible kind of chicken or the egg situation eventually. So we need to clean up your blood, clean up your gut infections, and then we can start to heal the brain. But Jamie, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I just, when I read this question, anything you recommend prioritizing for deepening the healing process, that's kind of the same thing that I thought was beginning the process by kind of cleaning up the entire body processes, the systemic processes. And once you've come to that neutrality, what you feel as though is your balanced state. And once you feel like you're okay to take that next step, then going into more of the, whether it's a functional or somatic healing route, again, entirely up to you to decide and perhaps experiment with, then you can go into that without being in a place where you're constantly activated or triggered. So you know you're where you're balanced. You can always come back. That's your foundation. And then you can go into different processes. I mean, there are so many. I mean, if we name a few, where do we begin? There's, of course, the body work. There's the somatic therapy. There is the bioenergetics, the Reiki, the energy healing. There is, different kinds of ceremony. There is
acupuncture,
different body work. There is
therapy.
Yeah, and there you could go into your own self by learning. For me in my journey, I was really called to explore intimacy and tantra, and that led to a whole unraveling of my psyche in a sense. And it's completely up to you, like I mentioned before, finding practitioners or teachers that you really resonate with, that you want to learn from and feel safe to open yourself, to be vulnerable, and to release. And
Can
so
I add to that just a little snippet? I find people are always, not always, but very commonly afraid that they're going to pick the wrong practitioner. Mm-hmm. And if I can just share, all of the different practitioners and courses and modalities that I've hired and dove into with hopes of it being like the thing that would heal me. In hindsight, it might not have been the thing, but I took at least one thing from everything that I still carry with me, and I'll remember, oh yeah, I remember that thing, and that made the thing, and then now, and it helps me, right? So, I think if anybody's worried, oh, I'm going to pick the wrong practitioner, I'm going to spend all this money and it's not going to be the thing. Well, it's a step. It's always steps in the right direction. Take what you want and leave the rest,
And is there ever a final thing, really, because once you go deep, you're deep and you can go deeper. I don't know that it ever ends. And that's a contemplation I've been having, especially since I've gotten into this work more so. It's like, oh, wow, I got to a place and I feel really good. Oh, and you're telling me there's more. Oh, cool. Okay. We'll keep going. Yeah, thank you, Cass. And so our last question from Riley. Hi, love. She says, hi, ladies. This has been very insightful and relatable. So thank you. I'm realizing during this time, without my work, my usual distractions, distance from family and friends, etc., I'm being triggered constantly by past traumas. I would love to take this time to release some of them, but I'm wondering if you have any suggestions where to start. What is the first step you would recommend? I would love some strategies to help navigate through the pain and anxiety that has been overwhelming, that is usually suppressed and now surfacing. And I would love to preface this answer by saying, what an extraordinary time we are in. I feel so charged up by it, because it seems like, and Riley, you are not alone, girl. Like, this is happening for so many of us too. And something I've written about is, when our outside world, when our distractions and busyness and our technology is reduced, like it has been for the last month and a half, our inside, our consciousness, our heart, and our body is allowed to speak. And it is wild, the things it is saying. And it's coming up in all shapes and forms, and especially as our triggers. And this is something I had a talk on, I think it's a couple weeks ago now, and how to be with our triggers. And I think the biggest and the most helpful step, and this can be different for everyone, but the kind of starting point, the pinprick of the whole, is awareness. And it seems like you're there, but awareness when it's arising. Because when we have a moment of awareness, then we have this clarity of choice. We realize we have a choice in how we react or what we do in the moment. And if not, it's very often that we're coming from a place of reactivity, and we're kind of acting, and it feels like this inside. It just is chaos. It's a fucking uproar of our shit, and it's all coming to the surface, and it's not a bad thing, but we have that momentary pause. Kind of feels like that. You can take a breath. After the awareness, you have choice. And then from there, you, using the tools that you've gained from all of these different experiences or teachers or practitioners or healing journeys that you've been on, you can begin to understand how best it is for you to react in a healthy way to a certain situation. And of course, you know, the deeper you go, the deeper you go. So you can then, once you have the awareness and you take that momentary pause, and that becomes a more normal pattern that you develop, then you can begin to get curious of what's deeper there. And why is that continuing to show up in this way? And so that's where I'd say it's super important to start. And then we can do all of those, I mean, somatic tools, or working with functional practitioners, or it's whatever is true to your heart that you can move forward in, whatever feels good. Cass, do you want to add to that?
It's beautiful. I'd leave it right there. That's fantastic.
Okay. Wow. Awesome. Before we close off, I just want to say I have so much gratitude for each and every one of you for showing up. So thank you. I think these conversations are imperative in gently changing the way we are in such a beautiful and whole way. And let's keep the conversation going. You can connect with me all over the place. If you search Healing with Jamie Lee, Instagram, Facebook, or healingwithjamielee.com, you'll find all of my info, ways to work with me, ways to connect and talk. And so thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Word, sister. Thank you as well to everybody. This was such an amazing turnout. And I think it just lends to how important this topic is for people nowadays, you know, and I really just want to honor each of you in the state that you're in while joining us. And you're all beautiful. You're perfect as you are. I hope you know that. And definitely, if you want to keep the conversation going with me and have any questions, Be Well with Hope is my handle on Instagram. And my website is Be Well with Hope. I blog a lot about trauma and recipes for people with gut health issues. And I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you all so much. Have such a beautiful day.